will make a presentation. I do have the annual budget letter that I am not going to read word for word, but I will reference a section of the letter and would encourage council to go back and look at this. This is contained in the material that we will present today with the budget rollout. Okay, Mr. President, members of council, as required by Title IX, Chapter 70 of the Delaware Code, I respectfully submit the proposed annual operating budget for Sussex County for fiscal year 2025. The FY25 proposed budget was developed by the County Administrator, Finance Director, COO, Deputy Finance Director, and Manager of Accounting. This recommended budget was drafted after receiving submissions from county departments. We greatly appreciate the efforts of the directors and their staff in assisting us in producing a balanced budget. There were factors affecting the development of the FY25 budget. As with past Sussex County budgets, this fiscal year budget is developed with caution in mind, given its heavy reliance on the local real estate market. Suffice it to say, should real estate activity start to decline, the county's financial outlook will be affected. Similar to the national economic situation, sticky inflation and high interest rates continue to influence the county's building-related revenues. It is difficult to predict where our building-related revenues will level off. As such, we followed a conservative budget philosophy in the development of this budget to insulate against any foreseeable decline. The philosophy uses cautious revenue projections and keeps ongoing expenses at a sustainable level. Another factor to consider in the development of this budget is the increased demand for county services. For example, our Public Safety Department has experienced a 10-year increase of 15.5% in 911 calls and 42% in paramedic incidences. To address this increase in demand, we have increased public safety employment by 7 positions. We also provide additional funding to the Delaware State Police and the local law enforcement agencies. Aside from public safety, demands on our Planning and Zoning Department continue to increase. To assist this department, there is another person in the budget to help with their workload. The pressures to meet these demands are not taken lightly when we try to build a budget that can be supported with current revenues. The county receives the bulk of its revenues each year from property tax and realty transfer tax, known as RTT, with RTT being the largest revenue source. In this year's budget, RTT is $3.5 million more than FY24. While our trends show that the FY25 amount is at a short-term attainable level, it remains at a level that is higher than what was collected 6 years ago. And although RTT is our single greatest source of revenue, it's limited to some of the council's most critical services, including paramedics, fire and ambulance companies, police, 911 dispatchers, economic development, assessment, public works, and open space. Thus, we can keep pace with the population and the demand for our critical services through the use of RTT. However, should RTT drop below anticipated levels, it is likely at some point in the future the county will need to seek additional revenue from the taxpayers. Revenues are only one side of the budget equation. The other side is the expenses that support our government services and the county council's priorities. Any new project requests were scrutinized to ensure they are necessary, align with the council's objectives, and address long-term concerns and issues of the county council. The program and projects funded through the budget that address these objectives involve the Excite Sussex Loan Program, additional funding to the Housing Trust Fund for housing rehabilitation, and expansion of public safety through additional staff. As council sets its priorities, the budget team and the department heads collaborate to put forth sustainable expenses that best support this mission. I want to personally thank everyone for being thoughtful and reasonable with their requests. In closing, the county's fiscal year 2025 budget recognizes that demand for our services and on our staff continues to grow. Whether it's the increase in population, new regulations, or demands from the public, our government is being called upon more and more to perform. Our goal with the budget is to provide more funding to meet those demands, but at the same time, keeping the expense at a level that can be sustained with the current tax base. Now, Mr. President.
And you didn't read all that to us, right?
I'm trying to reference the most important parts. 5 pages. All right, we're going to transition down to the podium and get into the details.
It sounded like you were trying to brace council that if the money doesn't come in on the income side, we've got to cut the salaries of the county council.
That would be one recommendation that you could perhaps entertain if needed.
We're all about teamwork, you know.
We appreciate that, yes. All right, so to the presentation that really matters, and this PowerPoint was developed by Ms. Jennings, and as in years past, we always like to start with the current budget and take a look at our successes. And this really provides a great way to measure what you have provided for this year and going forward for some of the decisions that will be made in the upcoming budget. We also like to gather these into our goals. The 5 overarching goals of the County Council are here on the left: committed to provide services that promote public safety. And then within the side of the slide, you can see each one of these goals and successes that have been accomplished in the current year's budget. I'm just going to highlight a few so we can get into some of the details of the slideshow. Starting with the top line, over 10 years, the EMS experienced a 65.5 increase in responses, but encountered a 5% improvement in our 8-minute response time. In May, you may recall, we started carrying whole blood on each of our SCEM supervisor units, and over 40 patients in the county have benefited from receiving whole blood. We've achieved the Commission of Accreditation of Ambulance Services at the EMS, and then sliding down out to the EOC, we have our 65th Medical Accreditation, our 30th Police Accredited Center of Excellence, and our 24th Triple Accredited Center of Excellence. The next goal is committed to provide services that promote well-being and prosperity, assisted with over 300 homes and housing repairs. After the first full year of our new workforce housing zoning ordinance, the county has seen 3 projects come through that will create 250 workforce housing units. We've completed over 2,000 sewer connections to our unified sewer district, and our Excite loan has funded 2 loans totaling $2.3 million to retain or create 70 jobs. The Delaware Strategic Fund awarded $1.7 million in Sussex to create or retain 88 jobs. And you recall the grand opening of our Kitchen Incubator back in October. Next goal is committed to provide services that promote and enrich quality of life. The county won the Conservation Stewardship Award for developing unique and innovative stormwater solutions at our Inland Bays plant. We 26,911 people attended 1,999 programs offered by our county libraries at a total of $240,000. Over 347,000 items were checked out at county libraries this year for a value of over $5 million. We delivered approximately 300 used books to Halfway Home in Seaford, Code Purple, and Little Free Libraries, Title Health, and several nursing homes and local hospitals. Next goal, committed to provide services in a personal, professional manner. Gathered over 8,000 satellite GPS data collection points in our sewer areas to assist while maintaining 4 inches of accuracy in our record drawings. Completed a full GIS rehost of upgrade and security of nearly 500 department applications. Created a Spanish-only Marriage Bureau website. Expanded our public accessible large-scale document management system for our planning and zoning documents. And we improved our turnaround on electronic deed filings by now averaging 5 minutes and under. And our last success, committed to providing services in a fiscally responsible manner, added $153 million to our assessment rolls in FY23. That's over $145 million from FY22. Completed 22 existing wastewater use agreements, totaling $1.7 million, which is up 31%. Our Finance Department earned the GFOA's Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting, which in a few minutes you'll see why. We performed 95% of our building repairs in-house. and we received a $1 million earmark from our congressional directed spending grant for our runway for extension. Okay. I will invite Ms. Jennings forward, and she is going to cover the next 30-plus slides.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Okay, so let's start talking about the trends and what we're seeing as we were building this budget. So as you can see from this slide, it goes back to 2003, what are our trends showing? We did have a peak in our building back in 2021, right at the time of COVID, and our building permits saw a big peak, and a lot of that had to do with pools, decks, things that people were doing a lot outside, and you can see that that has tapered off. In those building permits are also dwelling permits and residential permits. The difference between those two, residential permits also include multifamily homes, so that's why that line's above the dwelling permits. You can see dwelling permits are slightly ticking up a little bit over last year, but you can see there's 2 years of declines. Some other activity that we're seeing, a lot of this activity is driven by multiple things. It's either driven by population, which has caused our statistics to go up, like register of wills. Activity is also driven by interest rates, which then drives the real estate market down. And it's also driven by our sewer annexations, so other activity is up. So like our bills issued annually has increased. So you can see we're seeing different things depending on what is driving that activity. One thing I do want to point out, our constable complaints have gone down, and that's because you did implement that civil ticketing. So the constable has seen a lot of the repeat offenders have gone away. So that has helped. All right, our budget summary. If you look at the total, our budget is down over last year by $12.8 million. Most of that, the reason is because of the American Rescue Plan Act. We had gotten $45.5 million a few years ago, and each year we keep spending that down. So as we spend it down, that money goes away, so that drives our overall budget down. You'll see our capital projects are also seeing a decrease, and that's just with the timing of our capital projects. What you do see here is our increases in our operations. A lot of that has to do with inflation. Prices of everything keep continuing to go up. What I do want to stress here is even though we're seeing a 10% increase, a lot of this is one-time capital projects or projects within the general fund or the sewer fund. For example, 3.5 of that general fund is for one-time expenses, such as the accommodation tax. As we keep collecting it, we just keep adding it to the budget. EMS equipment, there's a $1.4 million purchase there, and we do have a $1 million commitment to Dewey for the medic station there. So, as I said, it shows a 10.4, but a lot of that has to do with one-time expenditures. Same thing with the sewer fund. We're seeing an increase there. They have requested to start building up their inventory, so if things break, they have things already put away. That actually helps with our costs long term instead of buying things in emergency situations. So our revenue highlights, there is no increase in taxes. We are using reserves this year to balance the budget. This is up over last year by $2.4 million. When we do use reserves, we do use it on one-time expenses, not our ongoing operational costs, so that we can keep it sustainable. Tax revenue is up $683,000. This is just due to the improvements being added to the land. Again, no increases in taxes. These are just more improvements. Really, transfer tax, we are relying on this more this year. That is up $3.5 million. Good thing with interest, it might hurt the real estate market, but it helps with the money in the bank. So I'm able to rely on interest a little bit more this year at $2.1 million. Grant revenue is up. This is mostly due to the money that we get from the state of Delaware to support the paramedic program. The WILS revenue is up, and again, as I said before, that is population driven. I did mention that our savings use is up, but all this gets netted out to show that the building-related revenues are down this year at $1.1 million, and we'll get into that. So our revenue, how is our budget balanced? So the big pie chart is fiscal year 25, and you can see the majority of our budget is being paid by realty transfer tax, 35%. I wanted to put the 2024 chart so you can see that the realty transfer tax proportion, even though we're adding another $3.5 million the balance the budget with realty transfer tax, proportionately it's still the same amount of that pie. What is dramatically different is miscellaneous revenue. You can see that was 1% last year and 4% this year, and that's where that interest revenue was that I talked about. And other financing sources, that's the use of savings. Again, we increase the use of savings, that way the percentage of that goes up. All right, as I mentioned, we are using more reserves, and we only use reserves for non-reoccurring costs so that we can keep being sustainable on our tax base. We use our reserves in the general fund and the capital projects fund. Capital projects fund is completely, that's how we sustain it without having any kind of extra debt, is that we're using reserves there. What you can see is there's this lighter blue color, and that's realty transfer tax reserves. That's where most of our reserves are. So that's where we're spending it in savings. You can see going down to the general fund, the deferred accommodations tax. You asked me that question earlier today. How much do we have in the bank? We have $3 million in the bank. That's deferred, carried over to the next year until we start spending it. Reassessment project is still going on. EMS equipment, it is $1.4 million in the budget, but some of that is paid with state funds. We are keeping the Trap Pond project in the budget. They haven't asked for the money just yet, but they will. The fire study is still going on, and we are adding more to the Housing Trust Fund this year and using reserves.
Nina, can I ask you a question? I'm sorry to do
You're
this,
fine.
but
No, you're fine.
and I should have asked you a couple of weeks ago when we went over it, but the discussion this morning with Fenwick Island brings it up.
Yep.
The tax for hotels, has that been stable? Is it going up, down?
It's been very stable. It's $1 million a year is what.
Has it been increasing at all, or?
I wouldn't say that. We did see a little bit higher 2 years ago than last year. I saw it go down just slightly, but it's very, I mean, it's immaterial in my eyes how much it's fluctuated.
I just want to make sure we have enough money to help Fenwick Island.
Yes, that won't be a problem. So you'll see in this budget, I'll actually have $4 million in the budget to be used because I anticipate collecting another $1 million in this budget.
Shouldn't have told him that.
Full transparency.
Hey, Gina, just quick before you
Sure.
move on. The Excite Delaware
Go back.
2.5,
Yeah.
is that the Discover Bank grant?
It is the Discover Bank. So we do have money in an account. This is just how many anticipated loans we expect to be drawn down. So we have more than that in the bank, but this is just, as I said.
But that's mostly the Discover Bank grant.
Correct. Yep. All right, we do have some changes in fees. I am proposing a $25 annual increase in our water rates. That's a 6.4% increase. A $10 increase in sewer rates. And I do talk about water and sewer at the very end of the presentation to explain why I'm requesting those. A new fee, it's a plan resubmittal fee. It's $300 per occurrence, and this would be happening in two different departments, one being the engineering department for sewer and road reviews. They get a lot of reviews from engineers, and we ask exactly what we need, and sometimes we have to reject them, and we have to start all over again. So staff's asking to help with the backlog is that we implement a rejection fee. Planning and zoning, similar situation. A lot of times, planning and zoning will review a site plan. It'll go through certain processes, and then it'll come back and bring in more changes. And right now, we don't charge anything to go back and review again. So we'd like to implement a fee to review. Data center, we have a data center in Seaford. We do have some space on our racks. So the IT director would like to start charging for municipalities that want to have some of their data stored off-site in a remote location, and that's what we are going to charge, $500 a month for half rack and $1,000 per month for the full rack. You guys are working through the accessory dwelling units now, so I'm setting the fee here so that it's ready to go when you're ready. It would just be equivalent to any other Board of Adjustment application, which is $500. Major subdivision applications where a forested buffer plan is required, we're currently charging the same, but it is requiring more work on our staff, so we equate that to the time of our staff. We like to make that $1,750 plus the $50 dwelling unit. So you can see it's $750 more than a major subdivision without a forested buffer. New fees in Marriage Bureau. There is a single status form that they are continuing to be asked to be filled out from Maryland. We don't charge anything, but Kent and Newcastle already do charge, so we are asking to put a fee in there. And also our out-of-office ceremonies, increase those. Delaware residents will go up $25 and out-of-state couples will go up $50. Marriage Bureau still is not self-sustaining. Tax dollars do support that, so we do want to keep trying to increase their fees so that it can start to be a little more self-sustaining. They bring in about $200,000 and it costs about $300,000 to operate that department. And then one other thing, I do want to be clear, when you introduce the ordinances, you'll see there is a recorder of deeds ordinance for fees, but there is no new fees or increases. It's actually eliminating fees and decreasing fees. So that's why you're not seeing here. There's a lot in the current fee ordinance right now. It says that they'll do title searches and things like that they don't do. And we also wanted to align with other copying fees that other departments do today, make sure that we're charging the same in all departments. All right, going into building-related revenues, and you can see where we have been seeing some decreases. So I wanted you to go back and look at this chart on 2021 to 2022. You can see that we actually realized the $2.1 million decrease in our revenues. Yes, 2021 was a big year, as I showed you with our building permits and people doing a lot of the outdoor work. Then we came into 2023. We saw another $2.7 million decrease. Moving into 2024, we only have a month left, and I'm already expecting to see about another $1 million decrease. So we're looking at about a $6 million decrease in revenues over time. Luckily, we do budget very conservative on these building-related revenues, so we're able to continue to sustain knowing this. And we're going to continue to do that. When you look at the 2025 budget, I'm still budgeting 80% of what we collected in 2023. So you can see that's actually less than we brought in 2019 and 2020 to make sure that we're keeping our expenses in check. Same thing, similar trend with realty transfer tax. You can see, again, it peaked at 63 million. These are just a lot bigger numbers. So you could see huge decreases. In 22 to 23, we had seen a $9.5 million decrease. Another $6.4 million decrease. So we're looking at almost $16 million difference in what we collected back in 22. So where can I budget is the good question for 2025. I'm estimating 35 million, still a good number. I'm expecting to bring in 47 million this year. So you're looking at about a 65% difference between what I'm anticipating versus what I budget. I'm very careful in how much we budget in related transfer tax because the more that we rely on it, the more it's going to be harder if this ever does go down below that $35 million mark.
Gina,
Yes.
I know this is going to be a question that's going to be hard to answer, but, projecting out, past 25, I mean, it looks like a bubble, we could call it the COVID bubble or whatever.
Right.
And it looks like we may have returned to maybe a long-term trend. It's going to be in the 35 range, you think? Or
I'm hopeful.
do you think market forces are going to work on that?
Correct. It's all going to really be dependent on interest rates and where they're going to be because we're still seeing a lot of sales with people moving into the area, but we're not seeing a lot of sales with people moving between homes within it. It's just new home sales.
New home sales.
Exactly. So where is it going to level off? I'm hoping the 35 million is our new base and not 13 million like it was back in 2010 because of the inventory that we have today versus what we had in 2010. So that it's still 35 million is still a good conservative number that we can rely on.
Yeah, but your comment about that it's primarily driven by new home sales, and we look out to the conclusion of the baby boom bubble in the coming years, that could be a transition in our market as fewer people retire and move to this area.
Correct.
So I know you've got an eye on that. But,
I do. I use best I can with the data. I often look to Newcastle County that does not have the growth that we have here and see where their baseline is compared to where our baseline is with the number of homes versus the number of homes they have and use that percentage. And 31 million seems to be the new baseline if this bubble goes away, in my eyes, using those statistics, thinking that 35 million is still going to be okay and sustainable going forward.
There will eventually come some baseline that will
Correct.
be a sustainable number.
Correct.
But yeah, we've had a couple of gravy years here, so things seem to be returning more to a trend.
Correct. Yep. Still sticking with realty transfer tax, we can use realty transfer tax on certain things. There is about $42 million of qualified realty transfer tax expenses in this budget, in this 25 budget. But again, I don't want to pull $41 million of realty transfer tax to support that because I don't know how sustainable $41 million is. I feel $35 million is probably more sustainable and a good conservative number. So using that 35 million, how am I spending that? And of course, most of it being public safety. All right, so let's break it down. Why are we seeing a 10.4% increase? As most governments, especially on the general fund side, most of it is personnel costs. So 48% of us are personnel costs. The 6.9% increase has to do with COLAs, merits. We do have there's 7 new hires in public safety. That would be right there. Our other professional services, this is related specifically to reassessment. We do have some extra costs for legal as we start moving forward to the appeals process. Contractual services, this is a variety of things. Dog control, insurance, house repairs, with community development. We're getting more federal funds, but we still have to budget that on the expense side. There's not much of a change in supplies, fuel, tools. Programs and projects, that's specifically to a flood mitigation project where we're getting federal funds for that, but again, still need to show it on the expense side. Training, that's down, that just ebbs and flows. Grant and aid is up, that is the largest increase, but a lot of this again has to do with some one-time expenditures that I keep reiterating. One, additional $1 million for the accommodation tax, $1 million to Dewey for the medic station. We have the DSP contract. We are adding another trooper there. That's $500,000 there. You are in this budget, it's another $500,000 for rehab as well. So, and then we have another $100,000 for local law enforcement. So there's your $3.1 million. Capital improvements. This is directly related to EMS and their $1.4 million in capital projects purchases for cardiac monitors and transport ventilators. Just another way to look at how our expenses are, so instead of just listing it out by the functions, here's by functions. You can see down the bottom, what I'm trying to point out here is you can see public safety is our largest increase over time. And we do have, as I mentioned, 7 new positions, $1.4 million for EMS equipment. But what I'm trying to get at here is that out of the $9.3 million we're seeing in general fund, that 10% increase, of that 41% of our increase is related specifically to public safety internally, okay? The next line, grant and aid, you can see grant and aid is also up $3 million. But again, that's public safety. We're given the $1 million for the Dewey Station, $500,000 to DSP, another $100,000 for local law enforcement. So you could take those two key parts of public safety. Our budget's increasing of $9.3 million. 60% of that is all related, again, to public safety. Now, that's internal and external. All right, so staffing. Again, general fund, most of it is, our budget is staffing, so I want to make sure I get into this. So we're adding 11 new staff. 7 of them are directly related to public safety and public safety departments. But if you also look in the middle of that chart, we are also hiring a human resource specialist, one person there, to help with public safety. So even when we're hiring in the general fund on the general government side, it's also helping with the public safety. And as I mentioned before, sewer is continuing to grow. We continuing to have annexations. We're also adding staff there as well. All right, going into our staffing and our trends, I think this is a good story to tell. If you go back to 2009, that was when our peak of our staffing was prior to the first bubble. We had 549. We went down to 492, and we are steadily climbing up to 476. So that's how many staff are in the budget today. But I want to talk about the makeup of the staff and how it's changed over time. So from 2009 to 2014, the staff that we lost, there's 47. Again, these were mostly early retirements that allowed us to do this attrition. You'll see we lost most of those staff in the building-related and general government. Now, we were able to do a lot of it with the general government because we have automated a lot of our processes over time. So it's made us more efficient. So moving from 492 to 576, we have had a total change of 73 new employees. But despite of where we lost, you can see where we gained most of that staff. It's been in public safety. We had some in engineering, which again is directly related to our sewer growing. But overall, our general government has stayed very lean. We've had an uptick, as you can see, in building-related activities, so we've also filled some of those positions. So overall, the makeup between the last peak to the new peak is 27 new employees. And as you can see in that makeup, 48 of those employees are gone to public safety. So we have a totally different makeup of our staffing. But what I find really interesting is that last chart there at the bottom is that our population growth and the growth of the overall county employment and the public safety employment. So our population has grown since 2009, 31%. Our overall county employment has grown 5%. However, our public safety employment has grown 25%. So where we have grown in staff has keeping up with the inflation with the population of the county.
Could you review the constitutional offices? I know our recorder of deeds was able to
Correct.
save one person.
Correct. Recorder of deeds have went down. And you can see over time the constitutional offices in general have been very conservative, done a great job, and overall have gone down 7 positions overall. But just
Where
within
else
the
did they
last
come
year.
from?
I think some of them were deeds, because it was all building related at the front end is where we lost most of those. But recently, and that was back in the 2009 to 2014 loss. It's just we never hired them back on this end.
And yet our service level has continued to maintain or improve because of transitioning to computer models and
Correct. We had bought
automated
new
services.
software. That is correct. We had bought new software in there, and a lot of it, they can do a lot of the electronic filing, and we don't have, the title searchers do not have to come in as often as they used to have to. Yep.
I'm sure our representatives from those offices would make us aware if they had a need, right?
No doubt. They're here today. They could raise their hand if they like. So, of course, with regular salary costs with employees, health insurance costs, and we are not immune to this. If you've read in the paper, you could see that the state of Delaware was seeing a 24% increase in health insurance, and they have been passing it on to their municipalities and their employees. And you'll see we're a little more isolated. We are self-insured. We do have some programs in place to keep our costs in check. But we still, with that, we're still seeing a 10% increase over last year in health insurance for our regular employees and a 4% increase for our pensioners. Our pensioners did see a huge increase last year, and that's usually related to prescription cost. So I am proposing this year to increase the contributions of our employees. Grant and aid. So this is, again, a large piece of our budget. The next few slides, I'm actually going to go into detail of the biggest part, which is public safety and open space. The accommodations tax, there's not much to talk about other than we are collecting it. And I did mention, as we were just talking with Mr. Schaefer, there's $4 million in the budget this year, which is the $3 million in reserve plus the $1 million that I expect to collect in 2025. I do want to again highlight one more time. You'll notice that the biggest increase is the housing assistance. It says $1,270,000. That is up $500,000 for housing rehabs. As we have started spending the ARPA funds down, community development has done a great job spending that and rehabbing, and I was able to use some of the savings to continue those programs.
Do you happen to know offhand if we've been doing more with the that trash pickup program? Is that, I know it seemed like we hit a lull there for a while where they weren't utilizing ours.
It's not being utilized as much as I would hope, and I don't know if that would definitely be a Mike Costello question as to why it's not being utilized as much. But I know that it requires the Department of Correction. They have to sign up for overtime,
I
and there's
thought
a
that
lot
was
of
the
things.
issue, wasn't it? That
Correct.
Getting their guys to sign
Actually,
up.
correct.
Yeah.
But we continue to fund it if it's available. We have it on our website that people can put in the streets, so they see a lot of trash, and we can.
Just one of my pet peeves is seeing trash on the side of the road. It just drives me crazy.
Okay. So, like I said, I want to go over the grant and aid, largest parts of that. Public safety, again, obviously it's a theme here. $12.2 million of our grant and aid is public safety. You will see over time how much we've spent with Delaware State Police. Last year, you guys committed to add state troopers to the budget, one last year, one this year, one next year, with the state also adding 3. So that has increased the budget $500,000 this year. Local law enforcement giving each of the towns another $5,000 to help support their entities. Fire and BLS, that is staying consistent with previous years. The reason it's down is because of my conservative budgeting on building permits, but they're most likely going to be bringing in what they brought in 2023 or close to this year. Obviously, 11.2 does not add to be 12.2. Down at the bottom of the slide, the other items to get to the 12.2, again, is the $1 million to Dewey Beach. We do give Fenwick $15,000 for their lifeguards. That's in the public safety budget. And every year I call Newcastle and Kent to try to give how much do they give to the fire service, and making sure on a per capita basis that we're still keeping pace. And as you can see, on per capita, we do spend $22 for fire and ambulance service. Libraries. So as you know, we have 3 county-owned libraries and 11 independent libraries. This slide is specifically for the independent libraries. That they are funded specifically, there's a library tax on the tax bill. They do get funds for the mobile home placement tax, and then we also fill in with general property tax of $800,000. So it works out to be $3 million, which is an increase of $70,000 from the previous year due to the increase in assessments. What I always find interesting is the libraries, they also do an analysis on how much they are saving the county or adding value to the residents, because when you go and get a book, it doesn't cost you anything, but they do equate that. For example, they have 2.7 million items exchanged among the libraries, and they put a value of $39 million to the county for the services that they offer. Open space. So council's been very active in open space over the last handful of years. I do keep a running total that since 2003 spent $22 million preserving 6,231 acres. So this year, there's $1 million in for farmland preservation, $400,000 still earmarked for the land trust, and another $6 million will be in the capital fund for any open space purchases that council would like to make. And we still have the $1.5 million, as I mentioned, for the trap pond that's in recreation. All right, we're getting close. Capital. So general fund capital, as we mentioned at the very beginning, is down $1.7 million. You'll see on the slide, most of the capital is related to airport and business park, which is about a third of the budget. I want to point out the very top line, again, what supports our general fund capital are realty transfer tax and our reserves. We do not have to have any kind of general fund debt for any of these capital projects. A lot of our airport projects are supported 90% by the federal government FAA grant and 5% from the state of Delaware. So that's where those numbers come from. Picking out some of these, the larger numbers, the 21 million admin annex probably stands out. That would be hopefully back here when the courts move, we can relocate some of the staff that's at West Complex and build an annex to this building so that we're all located and can streamline some of our processes, that it's a one-stop shop. The admin parking, again, is going to the state of Delaware to support their parking garage here. This has been in the budget the last 3 years, I believe. They just haven't got it done. I haven't asked for the money, so I have to just keep rebudgeting. EMS stations, as you know, we're trying to get out of the leases, keep building the stations. Millsboro will be finished in 2025, building a station in Ellendale, Lincoln, and then building a third station in Milton. So that's what you see over there for those 5 years. And then again, at the very bottom, I want to make sure you see that the property acquisition, that's the open space money put in for council to decide on any property you want to buy.
So the top line there, the RTT and the reserves is listed 45 million currently. And the way I read that is by 2029, it'll be 1.794.
And that's how much we need to support $8 million worth of projects.
Right.
As you can see, and this is typical of a 5-year capital project, we know a lot of what's in our near term.
So what I'm taking away from that chart is that while we are often recognized as having healthy and prudent reserves, much of those reserves are going to be deployed over the next few years.
That is correct. 45 million
And
is
so they're not
earmarked.
just sitting there for no reason.
Correct.
Which I think sometimes people criticize us for, but we do have a plan. And we need that money to be able to accomplish these goals.
Yeah, that is correct. All right, real quick, the sewer and water funds. So our sewer, again, is also seeing the 10.5% increase. I have been balancing that budget using savings over time. Our reserves are not where I would like to see on the sewer side, so I am requesting to increase the sewer rate from $330 a year to $340 a year per EDU. That would bring in another $900,000 to help. So even though we've been seeing increases time and time, I'm constantly using savings, so we're going to have to keep raising that rate until we can build that cash balance up. Just like you saw in the general fund, what's interesting here on the sewer side versus general fund is that personnel is only 21%. It is very capital heavy. You'll see here personnel went up 5%. Again, it's related to, we had the 2 new employees, merits, COLAs are in there. Other professional services, a stormwater management agreement. Contractual services, that is a big increase, but that is related to the treatment costs that we pay the city of Rehoboth and the city of Seaford to treat our plants, or treat our sewer. There's also an INI study in there that engineering would like to perform as well. But as you can see, I want to point out the other large increase is the debt. Reason that goes up is as we're bringing on new customers, those new customers are responsible for their own debt to bring in on their sewer and their infrastructure. So, you know, monthly, we're always bringing you guys new ordinances to adopt new debt, and that's where it gets picked up. So it increases that budget, but that's specific to the users that that is benefiting from that infrastructure. Real quick slide here. This is the assessment rates. I just like to show this every year to show every time somebody pays off their debt, we do decrease or eliminate the rate. If there's growth in that sewer area, we also lower the rate. So there's actually 7 districts that will see a decrease this year in their rates. All right, water. Similar scenario here with water as with sewer. It is a very small fund. We're talking $2 million. So it was a $228,000 increase, which is substantial when you're only talking $2 million. But the costs are all operational costs that it's very hard to eliminate. Water supply costs from the city of Rehoboth. We do want to buy some meters. There's some employment costs and shared costs, which costs that we bill from the general fund. Over time, we are losing money in the water fund, so I have to request that we increase rates at 6%. It's a $25 annual increase. That would bring in an extra $95,000. It'd be $417, which is still under what a normal usage would be used in Artesia, Rehoboth, and Lewis. Reserves are healthier over here on the water fund, so I'm glad to see that. And then capital for the sewer side. This is much bigger than the general fund capital that you had just seen. It's $52 million. However, 60% of that is related to septic elimination and sewer expansions. And again, that is paid through assessment fees. And you can see that top line, it says assessment fees, loans, grants, because specifically if you look, Lockwood there, $8.5 million, that would be paid back by people in the Lockwood area specifically. The ones that get spread out over multiple users are the treatment plant expansions. It's Inland Bay, Scruff, Piney Neck, and Wolf Neck. But again, that's 40%. And usually how we pay for those are connection fees. You can see there's $11.6 million in there. That is from when a new person connects, we collect that because obviously over time we're going to have to expand our treatment plant, and that's how we fund those. All right, that is it. There will be a public hearing on this on June 18th at 10:15. If anybody has any comments, they can email budget@sussexcountyd.gov or they can email me directly and I will get back to them. Is there any other questions?
I have a question, Gina.
Okay.
I'm wondering, how do you fund reserves?
So the reserves are created by surpluses in previous years.
Okay.
So our revenues, and that tends to happen because I budget so conservatively with realty transfer tax. Most of our reserves are realty transfer tax. So that year that we collected $60 million, I didn't budget $60 million. Mm-hmm. I did not see that coming, nor should we rely on it. So that's how we sustain our capital projects with those reserves.
Okay.
Any more questions of council?
Great work, Gina.
Thank you.
And the whole department, too.
Well, yeah.
I
Is
have
there a chance you have any motions?
4 ordinances to be introduced. First one, an ordinance establishing the annual operating budget for fiscal year 2025.
Anybody want to introduce that?
I'll introduce it.
Mr. Hudson introduces it.
Okay, next one, an ordinance establishing the annual service charges, annual assessment rates for collection and transmission and/or treatment, and connection charges for all Sussex County water and sanitary sewer districts.
Anyone?
I'll introduce it.
Mr. Raleigh introduces it.
Next one, an ordinance to amend Chapter 62, Article 5, Section 62-16 of the Code, Sussex County, to increase the fees for residents and non-residents for out-of-office marriage ceremonies and renewal of marriage vows, and to institute fees for miscellaneous services.
I'll introduce it.
Mr. Raleigh introduces it.
Okay, last one. An ordinance to amend Chapter 62, Article 6, Section 62-18A of the Code of Sussex County to modify current fees charged by the Recorder of Deeds and to enumerate such other Recorder of Deeds fees adopted in the budget process and set forth in the Delaware Code.
Anyone?
I'll introduce
Mr. Riley introduces it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all the hard work on you and your staff.
I do
We
have-
certainly appreciate all you do.
Thank you. I do have the grants I think I'm still up.